The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was a place of solemnity and tradition, a vast rotunda with vaulted ceilings made of a translucent crystal that refracted the ambient light into rivers of soft, dancing colors. Delegates from dozens of species typically gathered there to debate trade disputes, territorial claims, and the finer points of interstellar law. The architecture was designed to accommodate beings with vastly different needs for oxygen, temperature, pressure, and gravity, yet all those variations were carefully balanced in the main hall. Its acoustics were so expertly engineered that a single whisper could be heard at any point in the chamber if the speaker willed it. That day, however, no one spoke in hushed tones. An undercurrent of tension was palpable in every swish of robes, every subtle shift of posture or coloration across the diverse alien bodies. The entire council awaited the arrival of Ambassador Penella Harper, representative of Earth. Word had spread that the council's final vote on granting humanity full membership had come back with a disheartening result. There had been rumors for months. Some said the council found humans too emotionally unstable. Others whispered that humanity's own technologies were so valuable that certain powers wanted to delay membership until they could extract better terms. Most of the delegates, from the gaseous forms of Plint-Took species to the scaled, four-armed figure of council leader Zar Quinn, had shown up in formal attire befitting what was supposed to be a historic vote. Instead, the tension in the air suggested that history might veer in an unexpected direction. Seated in a place that was neither central nor marginal was Vex Tora, a senior diplomat who had served the council for centuries. His body was covered in a pattern of pale blue scales, each segment able to flare or darken to reflect emotional or physiological changes. He had observed the humans closely since they first made contact, and while he admired their curiosity, something about them unsettled him. It was not their achievements. Those were impressive enough, particularly in the fields of quantum communications and advanced terraforming. But the way they spoke, the politeness that seemed to conceal deep wells of passion or anger. He had heard rumors of a so-called polite mode, a state in which humans restrained their emotions as a courtesy to others. Stories circulated of what happened when that courtesy slipped. Vextora looked around the chamber. He saw Plint-Took, an undulating gelatinous delegate whose form shimmered in various shades of green. He saw Krill Vox, an insectoid figure whose wings gave off a faint hum when she was anxious. He saw the ambiguous shapes of other species, each adapted to different worlds, all sitting in a semicircle that faced the grand podium. At the center of the podium stood council leader Zar Quinn, trying to maintain composure. Zar Quinn's skin had a natural iridescence, shifting from deep blues to shimmering purples and pinks in fluid waves. But today the colors looked subdued. That alone indicated how serious the situation was. Moments later, Ambassador Penella Harper stepped through the main entrance. She wore a crisp, dark diplomatic uniform, bearing minimal insignia, just a small embroidered patch of earth. Her posture was perfectly upright, and the polite, professional smile on her face did not reach her eyes. She walked with a measured stride that commanded attention, yet avoided looking either aggressive or subservient. If the council had expected a meek petitioner, they would be disappointed. Vextora noted the subtle signs of tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her mouth, as if she were bracing herself for an unpleasant confrontation. Zar Quinn raised his forearms in a ritual gesture of greeting, and the entire chamber quieted. Although Harper's footsteps were soft, they echoed against the polished floor. She paused at the appropriate distance from the council leader and gave a polite nod. Despite the tension, she spoke with calm courtesy as she acknowledged the gathered assembly. Zar Quinn began in the formal tone typical of council proceedings. He thanked Ambassador Harper for her consistent dedication to negotiations, recalled Earth's assistance in defending certain frontier colonies, and recognized the humans' development of quantum communication methods that had vastly improved galactic trade. Then came the inevitable pivot, an explanation of why the Council had concluded that humanity was not yet ready for full membership. They required, according to the official statement, an additional 50 years of observation to ensure that humans could regulate their emotions in a manner consistent with the Council standards. The words sounded measured, but there was no missing the gravity of the blow. When Zarquin finished, the entire hall was silent. It was a polite, formal silence, the kind the Council reserved for particularly delicate moments. Harper said nothing immediately. She let the silence linger until it became uncomfortable. Her eyes swept across the ring of delegates. She saw Krill Vox shifting uneasily, wings flattening against her back, and Plint took trembling slightly as though his gelatinous body were about to ripple apart. She saw Vex Tora's gaze, calm yet watchful, as if he were trying to decode her every expression. 50 years is a long time, Harper said softly, her voice carrying surprisingly well in the great chamber. Especially when Earth has spent the past 8 months offering unprecedented technological sharing, assisting in critical defense operations, and earning the trust we believed would be reciprocated. No one replied right away. A few delegates exchanged glances. The notion of an 8-month span, so brief by the standards of species that might live for centuries or millennia, might have seemed trivial. But humans did not measure time in such vast increments. The imbalance lay not merely in perception, but in the sense of urgency. Half a century was a small fraction of many species' expected lifespans, but for a human, it was long enough to nearly bridge a generation. Zarquin cleared his throat. Ambassador Harper, we acknowledge Earth's contributions. Truly, they have been invaluable. Yet we have observed certain incidents that suggest humans harbor intense emotions, sometimes concealed. We are concerned that these emotions could manifest in ways detrimental to the harmony of Council affairs. He glanced at Plint Took, who wobbled forward to offer an example. The human trade representative Marcus Weber, who had once excused himself in the middle of negotiations only to punch a wall in private, fracturing several bones in his hand, then returned smiling as though nothing had happened. Then Krill Vox described psychological studies suggesting humans possessed a unique capacity for sustained, internalized anger. All the while Harper listened. Her gaze did not waver, and she still maintained a faint curve to her lips that might pass as a smile under casual observation. Yet something in her eyes suggested her patience was thinning. Each mention of unsettling emotional volatility or bottled anger was like a subtle prod, challenging her composure. She finally spoke. You say you're concerned about our capacity for anger. Let me ask, did that anger ever harm your citizens? Did Marcus Weber strike the merchant, or cause any property damage beyond that wall? There was a pause. Plint Took quivered. No, Ambassador, but it indicates potential for sudden aggression. The ability to hide it behind a polite demeanor is disconcerting. From her seat, Harper offered a pleasant laugh, though Vextora noticed a slight tightness at the edges of her eyes. Marcus Weber is an extreme case. Most humans find his outbursts embarrassing, to say the least. Krill Vox's antennae curled. But this phenomenon is not limited to Marcus Weber. Our data show that your entire species has this capacity to remain courteous on the surface while harboring powerful emotions underneath. Harper's polite smile did not fade, but she lowered her datapad onto the smooth dais with an almost ceremonial slowness. In other words, you're saying Earth should be denied membership because we might become angry. Zarquin shifted in his seat. The swirling colors of his skin grew darker. It is not just the anger, Ambassador. It is the concealment. The Council prizes transparent, emotional communication. When a species experiences anger, sadness, or any intense emotion, we encourage them to express it openly and find consensus in communal resolution. Humanity's tendency to conceal or compartmentalize such emotions raises suspicions. Harper exhaled slowly. It appears, Council Leader, that we have a fundamental misunderstanding here. Let me clarify a critical point. Humans do not hide our anger out of deception. We do it out of courtesy. We learn that our emotional intensity can unsettle other species. That is why we develop what we call polite mode. When we use it, we dial ourselves down. Her words reverberated through the chamber, and a few delegates exchanged worried glances. Vextora observed this exchange with heightened interest. The idea that humans chose to subdue themselves, not due to weakness but to protect others, was unsettling in its implications. What would these people be like if they decided not to subdue themselves anymore? Before anyone could respond, Harper continued. Yet you claim that you want transparency. You say you want to see our true emotions. So I'm left wondering, are you truly prepared for what that might look like? Czar Quinn tried to respond, but in the moment he opened his mouth, a tremor of color flashed across his skin. He was grappling with a wave of uncertain emotion, caught between the Council's official stance and his own instinct that he might be stepping onto dangerous ground. I believe this meeting is concluded for now, he said at length, though his voice wavered slightly. We should proceed to the next agenda item. The Council has made its recommendation. Humanity's membership is to be delayed for 50 years. Harper's eyes narrowed, just a fraction. Then she spoke quietly, but her words rang through the crystal chamber with startling clarity. No, that single word pierced the hush. Several delegates looked as though they wanted to speak but felt paralyzed. Krill Vox's wings made a faint buzzing noise, and Plint Took's gelatinous surface trembled. Harper straightened her uniform and lifted her chin. We are not moving on, she said, her voice still calm, until we settle this matter here and now. Czar Quinn managed a formal tone, but his alarm was evident. Ambassador Harper, this is unprecedented. You cannot simply refuse to move on. Harper let her gaze pass across the semicircle of delegates. Council leader, you have just made a decision that affects 11 billion humans, more if you count our extended colonies. You arrived at that decision after months of negotiations during which we have shared crucial technology and risked our lives to protect your frontier worlds. And now, with the stroke of a pen, you dismiss us? You delay membership by half a century, as though our efforts were inconsequential. A few delegates appeared affronted by what they perceived as insolence, but Vextora noticed another layer. The ambassador was speaking in an even, gentle tone, yet the tension underlying her words was almost palpable. Was this the fabled contained anger they had studied? Czar Quinn grasped his ceremonial staff as though it might anchor him. Ambassador Harper, if you believe your reaction is helping your case, you are mistaken. You are displaying precisely the emotional volatility that concerns us. Harper gave him a measured, chilling smile. Oh, Council leader, if you think this is emotional volatility, you have no idea what humans are truly capable of feeling. In fact, right now, I am still employing a great deal of politeness. She glanced around, as if inviting each delegate to reflect on those words. Soft murmurs spread through the chamber like ripples in a pond. Then she let her voice drop lower. Trust me when I say, you do not want to see us turn polite mode off completely. Czar Quinn attempted a dismissive shrug, but his shifting skin tone betrayed his unease. Your threats do not intimidate us, Ambassador. The Council's decision is final. Now, kindly allow us to proceed with the next item on the agenda. Harper reached for her datapad. Vextora tensed, uncertain whether she would simply leave or escalate. She tapped the device, and behind her, a large holographic screen lit up with images from Earth's history. Scenes of war, conflict, technology, triumph, and devastation. In rapid succession, it displayed tanks rolling across smoky battlefields, rocket launches that pierced the sky, crowded protests in major cities, the splitting of the atom, the forging of alliances, and the development of starships that eventually reached beyond their solar system. This, she said, gesturing to the images, is humanity without polite mode. We fight ourselves, we fight each other, we argue, and we push boundaries. Yet we also innovate, we unify under threat, and we do what needs to be done to survive. We reach this council not by being passive, but by striving, by channeling our emotions, anger, hope, ambition, into tangible progress. We learn to keep our most intense reactions behind polite facades to avoid scaring everyone else. She paused, letting her hand hover near the holographic display. "We considered that politeness a gift to you." A hush fell over the assembled delegates. Even those predisposed to fear or distrust humans found themselves rapt, drawn in by the sheer scope of what Harper showed them. She turned off the holograms, and the final image lingered in the mind. A single human figure standing under the night sky, gazing up at a universe full of stars, as if daring them to be conquered. "That," Harper continued, "is who we truly are. We do not want to unleash chaos here. But if you insist on belittling our sacrifices and dismissing us as immature, then you leave us little choice. I promise you, Council Leader, that if humanity withdraws its polite mode altogether, your perspective on us will change drastically." No one spoke. The silence was deafening. Zar Quinn's throat worked as though he were attempting to swallow something hard. The delegates realized they were witnessing a potential crisis, not just a standard dispute about membership. Finally, Harper broke the tension by lifting her datapad again. "Effective immediately," she said, "I will advise Earth's central government to suspend any new technology transfers to Council members. We will be reassessing our defense agreements for the Proxima Frontier, and we will begin exploring direct diplomatic ties with individual species who express genuine goodwill toward us." That statement triggered an uproar. Multiple delegates began speaking at once, voices overlapping in the universal translator's range. Krill Vox's wings buzzed frantically, and Plint Took's body jiggled in distress. Some cried out that humanity could not take such extreme measures. Others protested that the Council had the sovereign right to admit or deny membership. Over the din, Vextora remained seated, his scales darkening with dread. He knew the Council was at a disadvantage if humanity chose to isolate itself. Over the years, Earth's communications technology had become essential for maintaining real-time links across vast interstellar distances. Their terraforming prowess had saved entire colonies from ecological collapse. Their small but effective military had turned back the Void Swarm when no one else had known how to handle that existential threat. In the midst of the chaos, Harper raised her hand. It was a simple gesture, yet it commanded attention. One by one, voices died down until the massive rotunda was quiet again. She spoke in a near whisper. "Imagine if the rest of humanity felt the same frustration I do right now. If, all at once, we decided that polite mode was no longer worth maintaining. Think carefully on that, Council Leader." With that, Harper gave a slight bow and walked out of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the silent hall, and the delegates let her go without challenge. She vanished through the grand doors, leaving behind an assembly suddenly aware of how precarious their political situation had become. Vextora's heart beat in triple time. He had seen many diplomatic confrontations over the centuries, but never anything like this. There was a terrifying precision in Harper's approach, a cold clarity that belied the accusation of emotional instability. What they had just witnessed was not wild rage, but a deliberate demonstration of the potential consequences the Council would face if it continued to treat Earth with condescension. When the doors closed, the chamber erupted once more in panicked debate, so loud that Zar Quinn had to slam his staff multiple times to restore order. After a few false starts at controlling the discussion, the Council leader beckoned only the highest-level ambassadors to remain. Everyone else was dismissed. Vextora, Krill Vox, Plint Took, and a select few others stayed behind, forming a smaller circle around Zar Quinn, who now seemed more subdued than ever. Zar Quinn took a moment to collect himself. He laid his staff across his lap and surveyed the circle, meeting each pair or cluster of eyes. "This is unprecedented, outrageous, a blatant violation of Council decorum." His voice echoed against the crystal dome. Vextora cleared his throat. "With respect, Council Leader, we should not focus on the breach of decorum alone. The real issue is that we have grievously underestimated humanity. They are not incapable of emotional regulation. In fact, what we witnessed was extraordinary emotional control, wielded as a diplomatic weapon." Plint Took's voice quivered like a ripple across his gelatinous form. "She threatened us with an economic and military pullout. She basically declared war, but without saying the word. Krill Vox's wings twitched. Did she? Or did she simply outline a course of action that anyone could have predicted if they saw the writing on the wall? She pointed out how reliant we've become on Earth's technology and military aid. And now we've forced her to show us the consequences of driving them away. Zar Quinn sighed, and the colors on his skin turned a muted gray, signifying his weariness. So you were suggesting that we capitulate, let them in without conditions, and appear weak. Vextora tapped a small device on his wrist, bringing up data that scrolled through the air in front of them, invisible to most except those whose implants could interpret the feed. We should look at the bigger picture. Humanity has spent the last 8 months integrating themselves into key sectors: communication, defense, commerce. They have also displayed more self-reliance than we ever credited them for. If they withdraw, we might be the ones who suffer most. Zarquin seemed about to protest, but the weight of the facts bore down on him. But their anger, their volatility. Council leader, Vextora said, what if we misread it completely? What if their politeness was never about deceit, but about kindness, as Harper claimed? If that is the case, then we've spurned their good faith efforts in the worst possible way. A hush fell over the smaller group. Even Plint Took and Krill Vox appeared lost in thought. They realized that in focusing so heavily on the question of humanity's emotional unpredictability, the Council had overlooked their strategic approach. Humans had quietly become essential to multiple facets of the Council's functioning, all while seeming to remain at a polite, secondary status. Zar Quinn's voice, when he spoke again, was heavy with reluctant admiration. They have outmaneuvered us in plain sight. Or perhaps we outmaneuvered ourselves through our own biases. Another chime interrupted. One of the junior aides passed along a message. Earth's central government had just issued a formal statement expressing deep concern about the Council's decision. Human merchants across multiple sectors were suspending transactions. Diplomatic staff were requesting leave to return home. Military forces near Proxima were initiating defensive protocols. Everything Harper had mentioned was already beginning to unfold. Vextora stared into the swirling lights overhead, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. We are at the edge of a crisis. The question is whether we can salvage this in time. Zarquin asked softly, how do we begin? No one spoke for a moment. Krill Vox broke the silence. We ask Harper to return. Not in a formal session, but in a smaller, candid setting. We attempt actual dialogue instead of hiding behind protocol. We show that we are willing to admit our misjudgment. Plint Took wobbled anxiously. But the Council has never admitted error in its thousands of years. Then perhaps, Vextora said, it is time for something new. We do not have the luxury of pride right now. We must adapt. Consider an evolutionary step in our diplomatic processes. Zar Quinn pressed the tips of his upper arms to his temples, a gesture that indicated deep consternation among his species. Very well. Draft the invitation. Summon Ambassador Harper. Let us see if we can reverse the damage before it is too late. While the Council scrambled to craft an appeal, Harper had already returned to her quarters in the diplomatic complex. She sat alone, scanning messages from Earth. Her colleagues were split in their reactions. Some praised her stance, while others fretted about escalating tension with the Council. She kept her composure. Anger still simmered deep within her, but as she breathed in and out, she reminded herself that humans had learned to mask their emotions not to deceive, but to survive. Even within Earth's own tumultuous history, conflicts often erupted when passions ran high without the guiding hand of reason. She would not let that happen here, not if she could help it. Several hours later, a notification arrived requesting her immediate presence in a candid meeting with the highest Council delegates. She frowned at the wording. The Council rarely used the term candid conversation. That was more of a human phrase, ironically enough. Still, she had demanded they revisit the decision, and now they were extending an olive branch. She decided to see what they had to say. When she returned to the Council's main chamber, it looked different. Gone were the formal dais, the layered seating that placed Council leaders at a height above everyone else. In their place stood a circular arrangement of chairs set close to one another, no obvious center of authority. The overhead lighting had been adjusted to near-Earth standards of warmth and brightness. The air was comfortable, no longer skewed toward the typical compromise that left humans slightly cold. Harper paused at the threshold, examining this reconfiguration with a critical eye. Zarquin rose from his seat to greet her. He wore simpler attire now, free of the ornate decorations that signified his rank. Others, too, had discarded their ceremonial garments. Vextora inclined his head in a respectful nod, and she spotted Krill Vox seated a short distance away, her wings folded neatly, antennae perked in cautious curiosity. Plint Took undulated a gentle greeting, evidently attempting to convey sincerity in the subtle ways that his gelatinous species managed nonverbal communication. As Harper settled into one of the chairs, she noted how even that small detail, the chairs themselves, was an attempt to level the playing field. Usually, Earth's delegation was placed at a respectful distance from the central podium, never fully integrated. Now, they sat in a circle with no obvious hierarchy. Zarquin spoke first, his voice quieter and lacking the formal resonance of council protocol. "Thank you for coming, Ambassador Harper, especially under such tense circumstances." She offered him a polite smile, though her voice was measured. "I appreciate the invitation, Council Leader. I take it we have moved beyond the standard procedures." He nodded, the colors on his skin muted in a sign of contrition. "We realized, after your demonstration, that perhaps our old methods no longer suffice. We wish to speak with you openly, without the layers of formality that have guided Council interactions for millennia." Her gaze swept the circle. She saw curiosity, apprehension, and above all, urgency. "And I am here to listen. However, I trust that this is not merely a formality to smooth over the unfortunate vote." Vextora's voice emerged clearly. "It is more than that. We have collectively reevaluated our position on Earth's membership. This reevaluation was prompted by how dramatically you revealed the misalignment between Council assumptions and the reality of human behavior." Harper folded her hands in her lap. "If the Council has truly changed its mind, I want to hear the specifics. My government will want clarity before we reverse any decisions we have begun implementing, such as suspending technology transfers." Zarquin cleared his throat, taking a moment to glance at the others in the circle. "You said earlier that humans hide your anger not to deceive, but to protect others, that you developed polite mode to make us more comfortable. That revelation has forced us to confront certain rigidities in our own structure. We are accustomed to reading direct, emotional cues from species that do not compartmentalize their feelings. We misread your restraint as duplicity." Harper inclined her head slightly. "I see. Is that the only reason for the delay? Or were there other motives involved?" He hesitated, and the colors on his skin began to shift into a subtle mix of light and dark tones. "Our fear of your anger was not solely about unpredictability. We also worried about the leverage Earth might gain if it were fully recognized. You possess advanced quantum communication technology, effective military strategies, and a self-sufficiency rate that outstrips many older Council species. We saw your polite exterior and suspected you were simply biding your time to dominate us from within." A faint smile touched Harper's lips. "So you denied membership because you thought we were secretly preparing to seize power." There was an uncomfortable murmur. Krill Vox spoke up, her voice clicking as her translator rendered it into words. "Some among us did, yes. Others simply saw your approach as uncomfortably aggressive beneath that politeness. We dreaded what might happen if such a species gained equal standing without us fully understanding them." Harper reflected on that, then exhaled. "I suppose I can't entirely blame you. Humanity has a complicated history. But you must understand, from our perspective, the Council's stance came across as arrogance. A refusal to accept that your centuries-old protocols might be insufficient for dealing with a species whose emotional range is both an asset and a liability." Vextora nodded. "Precisely. That emotional range can be an asset if directed properly. Some of us now believe that Earth's unique perspective on emotion and strategy might benefit the Council as a whole. Harper studied the circle. And how do you propose reconciling the fiasco of the delayed membership? Time is of the essence. My government is already pivoting, and it will take considerable effort to reverse that course. Czar Quinn stood up, though gently, not with the dramatic flair of a council edict. We are prepared to rescind the delay effective immediately and grant Earth the full membership it sought. But there is more. We wish to create a new position in the Council, a role dedicated to identifying areas where our own bureaucracy and culture have become stagnant, where we need honest critique and adaptability. We propose that humanity fill this position. Harper was momentarily taken aback. You want us to be your critics? The official troublemakers who point out inefficiencies and inconsistencies in the system. A ripple of uneasy laughter went around the circle. If you wish to phrase it so, Czar Quinn said, we would call it an innovation and evaluation counselor. But in essence, yes, we want humanity's gift for challenging assumptions to become part of our structure rather than a thorn in our side. She paused, letting the implications settle. I can't speak for Earth's central government without consulting them, but I can say this is an unexpected but intriguing offer. However, we will have conditions: immediate formal membership, a fair voice in future policymaking, and a revised approach to emotional expression in diplomatic sessions. Vextora caught the glimmer of something close to relief in Czar Quinn's posture. Those conditions are reasonable. In fact, we were hoping for a more direct dialogue about emotional norms across species. Perhaps your approach to containing intense feelings could teach us something we have dismissed for millennia. Harper's lips curled in a half-smile. You might not find it pleasant to learn. Flint Took, who until then had been quivering in anxious silence, wobbled forward. There must be a balance, must there not? If everyone suddenly discards politeness, chaos could ensue. Our societies rely on courtesy for stability. Harper nodded. True enough. Courtesy is necessary. But the lesson from humanity is that courtesy should never be used as a mask to avoid confronting important truths. We're not advocating for raw displays of anger all the time. We just want the Council to stop penalizing us for having the capacity to feel strongly yet maintain composure. Krill Vox's wings fluttered, generating a faint, soothing hum. And how do we ensure trust in this new arrangement? Harper leaned back slightly, choosing her words with care. Trust is built through genuine exchange. Humanity has tried to adapt to your norms, maybe too eagerly, and you misread that adaptation as deception. Now, if we are to move forward, we must meet in the middle. Our membership cannot be subject to indefinite scrutiny. We also understand you have protocols to maintain order. A partnership means adjusting those protocols so that all voices can be heard honestly. They spent the better part of an hour in that circle, discussing the practical details of membership, the timeline for reversing the previous vote, and the new position Earth might hold within the Council. Tension ebbed as they realized they shared a common goal: to foster a stable interstellar community that would not collapse under the weight of petty misjudgments and manipulated fears. When the meeting ended, Harper left with a sense of measured optimism. She had not abandoned her caution. Human history warned her that diplomacy could shift unexpectedly. Yet the fact that the Council was making tangible efforts to accommodate Earth's perspective signaled a kind of breakthrough. Perhaps the day's events had achieved precisely what was needed: a dramatic demonstration of how dangerous miscommunication could be and how vital it was to integrate humanity's perspective. In the following days, a formal announcement was circulated. The Council repealed its 50-year delay and granted Earth immediate membership. Harper and her team halted the withdrawal of technology, commerce, and military support. Certain trade routes came back online, and the sense of looming crisis lifted. Whispers spread among various star systems that the humans had forced the Council's hand by threatening to unleash their unfiltered rage. Yet the real story, which many species would soon come to understand, was more nuanced. Humanity had not proven itself through violence or outbursts, but through precise, controlled passion. They had shown they could be fierce if provoked, yet measured enough to avoid actual destruction. That balance, it turned out, was something the centuries-old council protocols had not accounted for. When Harper finally found time to breathe and reflect, she sat in her temporary quarters, a surprisingly plain room with a single large window. Outside, the city built around the council chamber glowed with the lights of dozens of alien species, each living at their preferred atmospheric and gravitational norms. She wondered if Earth would now see an influx of new visitors, curious about the planet that had so dramatically challenged the council. Maybe the real work was just beginning. Full membership meant Earth would have a vote on the council. It also meant responsibilities, alliances, and potential rivalries. The humans were no strangers to internal factionalism. The question was whether they could adapt to an even more complex galactic political stage. A soft chime at her door signaled a visitor. She rose and opened it to find Vex Torah standing there, his expression subdued but respectful. She gestured for him to come in. The quiet hush of the hallway gave way to the small living area, which contained a modest seating arrangement. He glanced around, taking in the minimal Earth-standard furniture. "I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all," she said, offering him a seat. "I suspect you've come to talk about the new position the council wants us to fill." He dipped his head in acknowledgement. "Indeed, the idea has stirred debate among many delegates. Some fear it will give you too much power. Others see it as a wise move, ensuring your input shapes council reforms instead of blind adherence to old norms." Harper studied him for a moment. "And you? Where do you stand?" Vex Torah's scales shifted to a gentle shade of teal. "I have lived centuries attending endless diplomatic sessions that followed the same script. Today's events prove to me that such scripts can become brittle over time. Perhaps we needed a species that can switch between politeness and passionate directness to show us the stagnation in our ways." She smiled. "Well, I'm glad someone in the council sees it that way." He hesitated before continuing. "There's something else I wish to express. Gratitude in my own way. You see, for a moment back there, I was convinced we had pushed you to an irreversible point. If you had completely abandoned diplomacy, we might have been at the brink of a disastrous conflict." Harper glanced at the faint reflection of herself in the window. "Trust me, Ambassador, I had no intention of sparking a war, but I had to make the council understand the stakes. Humans are not simply unpredictable brutes. We are also not docile creatures who wait centuries for recognition. If we must fight for our place, we do so in every sense, economically, diplomatically, or otherwise. I'm just glad you recognized that before it was too late." His 3 hearts, an anatomical curiosity of his species, pulsed in a rhythm that indicated earnestness. "Your demonstration of polite mode turning off was enough to jolt us. And yet it was controlled. That level of control, ironically, proved the council's accusations of uncontrollable rage were unfounded." She gave a rueful laugh. "In a way, yes. On Earth, we have a saying, 'The ones who smile the widest often contain the fiercest storms.' That doesn't mean we unleash them without reason." Vex Torah rose, inclining his head politely. "Well, I look forward to working with you, Ambassador Harper. I suspect the times ahead will be anything but dull." She stood as well, returning the slight bow. "Likewise. Let's hope we channel our energies into something productive." As he left, Harper found herself thinking about how close they had come to a catastrophic breakdown in relations. A few words, a few misread gestures, and entire star systems might have faced upheaval. That was the nature of high-stakes diplomacy on a cosmic scale. She knew Earth had walked a tightrope, revealing just enough of its underlying tenacity to command respect without tipping into outright intimidation. Days turned into weeks as the Council formalized Earth's admission. The official ceremony was far simpler than most might have expected. In the aftermath of Harper's demonstration, the Council seemed hesitant to return to overly pompous displays. Instead, the induction took place in the newly configured circular chamber, with all delegates seated at the same level. A hush fell when Harper signed the final membership agreement, her pen scratching across an alien medium that automatically recorded the event in dozens of languages. When applause broke out, translated into the myriad sounds and gestures each species used to express approval, Harper allowed herself a private moment of triumph. She recalled the old days back on Earth, when people argued whether aliens even existed, let alone if they would be friendly. Now, humans were forging a new role in a galactic community. And ironically, it was humanity's willingness to push back politely, then not so politely, that had sparked this change. She remained behind once the ceremony ended, watching the delegates disperse. Some approached her to offer individual congratulations. Others gave her a wide berth, clearly intimidated by the new arrangement of power. Plint Took wobbled over and stammered a few words of thanks for not completely abandoning the council. Krill Vox fluttered her wings in a polite pattern that signified cautious respect. Even Czar Quinn, who had earlier pronounced Earth's membership delayed by half a century, approached with measured humility. He thanked her for returning, for saving them from a potential interstellar rift that could have dwarfed any one species' ability to handle. Harper accepted these gestures graciously, though in her mind she recognized the Council's relief was driven by necessity. They had glimpsed how fragile their control was once humanity pulled back the veil of politeness. The galaxy was vast and contained threats far worse than petty political infighting. Threats Earth had already helped to repel once. If the Council had succeeded in isolating humanity, it would have done so at its own peril. Later that night, she found herself seated in a quieter annex, part of the Council's living quarters, where a panoramic window looked out on starfields so bright they seemed within reach. Beside her was a small table with a communicator, one she used to speak directly with Earth. She had already sent her initial reports and was waiting for official responses to the newest developments. Out in the corridor, she heard the footsteps of her staff, who remained at the ready to handle whatever negotiations arose next. She recalled the moment when she had declared that the Council's decision was garbage, an unfiltered word that had rung out with shocking candor in that hallowed hall. Her heart had been pounding then, fueled by a frustration that she had meticulously contained for the better part of the negotiations. If things had gone only slightly differently, they might now be on the brink of war. But the gamble paid off. By demonstrating how formidable humanity could be when pushed, she had forced the Council to see Earth as an equal, not a subordinate. With that realization came a more profound sense of responsibility. Membership meant Earth would be held to the same standards as other Council species, or perhaps even stricter scrutiny, given the abruptness of their admission. She would need to ensure that future human representatives walked the line between kindness and honesty, between politeness and effective negotiation. Let the rest of the galaxy see that humans were not savage beasts nor fragile empaths, but a civilization capable of both courtesy and fierce resolve. She allowed herself a brief respite, gazing out at the unfamiliar constellations that twinkled through the window. Somewhere among those stars were countless worlds, each with unique customs and perceptions. Humanity had just taken a significant step onto that stage. Tomorrow, there would be new arguments, new alliances, fresh discoveries. But for tonight, at least, she could rest, knowing that the day had ended with the Council taking a step forward alongside Earth, rather than leaving them behind. In the morning, official statements spread to every corner of Council space. Earth was now a recognized member, and with that came the formation of a special committee to review outdated Council procedures, chaired by a soon-to-be-appointed human official. The galaxies buzzed with the news, and opinions varied wildly. Yet the baseline consensus was that humans, with their unpredictable blend of politeness and passion, had changed the Council forever. Vextora, in his own chambers, reflected on that fact. He had been certain, just days before, that the humans were a volatile hazard to the Council's tranquility. Now he saw them as a vital catalyst for reform. Polite mode was less about hiding anger and more about managing it, something the Council had never before encouraged, since the Council's older species generally believed in outward emotional transparency. But perhaps there was a time and place for concealment, for patience, and then for revealing intensity when absolutely necessary. It was a nuance the Council had not mastered. Maybe in time, guided by a species that had wrestled with its own extremes for millennia, the Council would grow more resilient. And so the story spread, retold in rumor and official record alike, about the day a human ambassador had quietly but firmly told the entire Council no, and how that simple refusal upended countless assumptions, forcing every delegate to confront the possibility that their carefully orchestrated sense of order had glaring blind spots. In that retelling, Harper was sometimes portrayed as a fiery figure who nearly brought the Council to its knees, and other times as a tactful strategist who taught the Council a lesson in humility. She likely would have laughed at both extremes. The truth was that she stood in the middle ground, a diplomat who understood the importance of respect, but also knew when to reveal the steel behind her eyes. In the months and years to come, many interstellar travelers would arrive on Earth, curious to see the planet that bred such a paradoxical people. They would visit the towering cities where humans bustled about their daily lives, forging new ideas while layering them with politeness, yet always retaining a spark of boldness that had once propelled them from a single homeworld out into the cosmic vastness. Those travelers might be surprised to find how friendly, hospitable, and genuinely helpful humans could be, right up until the moment they felt cornered or underestimated. Then, and only then, would they catch a glimpse of that legendary controlled anger, the intangible shift from an accommodating smile to an unyielding gaze. Meanwhile, the Council adapted its protocols to allow for more candid discussions, ensuring no species felt compelled to hide legitimate emotions. Plintook learned to moderate his anxieties about human volatility, even cracking occasional jokes about Marcus Weber's infamous wall-punching incident. Krill Vox refined her approach to negotiations, seeing the value in carefully chosen moments of direct confrontation. As for Zarquin, he took pains to ensure no other species felt the sting of condescension that humanity had endured. He would often reflect that he had learned more from that brief confrontation with Harper than from a century of routine council sessions. Through it all, Harper and her successors continued to serve in a specialized role, traveling from system to help align laws, reduce bureaucratic redundancies, and encourage the Council to keep pace with changing realities. Every so often, an older delegate would mutter about the brashness of the humans, and Harper would smile calmly, remember the day she had declared no, and think to herself how vital it was that the galaxy never again underestimate the delicate balance between human kindness and determination. In the grand sweep of cosmic events, that confrontation was but a small ripple. Yet ripples could build into waves, and waves into tides that reshaped entire shorelines. On that day, when the Council witnessed humanity's polite mode turn off in real time, they unknowingly ushered in a new era, one where sincerity and strategy might coexist, where passion and courtesy need not be opposites, and where every species had something to learn from one another if only they dared to look beneath the surface. They mocked humanity's history until Earth's warriors showed them what it meant. Those words lingered in the era Vexer's mind as she strode down the polished corridor of the Galactic Council's primary station. Beyond the viewport on her right stretched a kaleidoscope of distant stars, each one hinting at the presence of civilizations either known or waiting to be discovered. She had walked this corridor many times before, but never with such a peculiar assignment at hand. Gathered in a spacious antechamber were the Council's senior assessors, an assortment of officials from various species, each cloaked in the typical formality that defined their vast interstellar organization. Their hushed discussions settled into a palpable tension when a holographic display rose from the central podium. The flickering light illuminated a rotating image of Earth, a blue planet orbiting a sun that was labeled Sol in the Council's records. Earth had petitioned to join the Council, and that petition had caused quite a stir. "They are children," remarked one official who had a smooth, lavender carapace. "No more than 20,000 years of civilization, so I hear. Is that accurate, Thera?" Thera inclined her head. It's difficult to date precisely, but our research suggests they have only developed advanced technology within the past few centuries by Council standards. Their total civilized history extends no more than a few tens of thousands of years, depending on how one measures it. Another figure, tall and slender, with 3 luminous eyes arranged in a triangular pattern, let out a scoffing sound. They have a history drenched in conflict, waging wars with primitive weapons before they even reach space. For all we know, they might be a threat. It was a familiar argument to the era. Many species within the Council had attained membership after proving a certain level of peaceful unification, an ability to quell petty conflicts long enough to demonstrate cooperative potential. Yet humanity's rapid ascent and the sheer volume of their war-torn past made them the subject of intense suspicion. Thea's official title was Assessor, an envoy tasked with in-person evaluations of emerging civilizations that had applied for membership. The mission was simple in theory: gather evidence to determine whether a species met the Council's criteria for moral, social, and technological development. In practice, she knew it was seldom so clear-cut. She listened to the debate swirl in the antechamber, a subtle static of half-formed opinions and unmasked prejudices. Some believed humanity's short, violent history proved they were unfit. Others pointed to humans' remarkable resilience and capacity for creativity as reasons they might be valuable allies. Once it became clear that the Council would send a delegation, Thera was chosen to lead it. She was not alone. Taz Lum, Fix, and Dronax would accompany her, each representing a different field of expertise. Taz Lum specialized in anthropology, Fix was a xenobiologist, and Dronax was a weapons specialist, the Council's eyes and ears on all things related to military strength. A soft chiming sound signaled the end of the briefing. The vote had been cast. The mission was confirmed. The station's hangar glowed with artificial lighting as Thera and her companions boarded the sleek diplomatic vessel that would take them to Earth. She paused at the threshold, glancing back at the corridor where the Council bureaucrats had dispersed, murmuring among themselves. She guessed that at least some of them hoped her team's findings would justify a preemptive containment measure. The Council had not hesitated in the past to neutralize species deemed too volatile. At the center of the vessel's main cabin, Taz Lum waited, hovering slightly above the floor in a specialized exoskeleton. Taz Lum's native form was a cluster of bioluminescent gas, and the faint pulses of colored light that shimmered within the glassy confines of the exoskeleton betrayed his apprehension. Fix stood off to one side, checking instruments that would be used to gather genetic samples and physiological data. Dronax loomed in the corner, arms folded, wearing the stoic expression typical of a weapons specialist. Thera took her seat, gave the pilot a nod, and felt the subtle tremor of engines humming to life. No one spoke until they had departed the station, gliding past the shining ring of starships moored around the Council's hub. Only when they were on course for Sol did Dronax break the silence. "I cannot fathom why the Council even humors these humans," he said, voice resonating like low thunder. "They have waged thousands of wars among themselves. I've read the preliminary files, tribal battles, religious conflicts, 2 so-called world wars, and countless smaller skirmishes. They treat war like a perpetual pastime." Taz Lum pulsed with an indigo flicker. "That's precisely the puzzle, Dronax. Despite such conflict, they managed to reach space and unify, at least nominally, under a planetary defense force. There must be something to learn from them, if only how they overcame so much internal strife." Fix set down a scanning device on a nearby console. "Not just that," she said. "Their physiology is strange. So many adrenaline-based adaptations, robust healing factors, and a circulatory system that compensates for major injuries. They seem to have evolved amid constant physical challenges." Dronax shrugged. "Yes, I've seen the data. But if their main survival strategy is unstoppable aggression, perhaps they are more trouble than they're worth." Thera held up a hand. "We'll see for ourselves soon. Our job is to evaluate, not to condemn before setting foot on their planet." Taz Lum's exoskeleton flickered in a sign of agreement. "Let's keep open minds. The journey to Earth took only a short time, thanks to the advanced capabilities of the Council vessel. Soon enough, swirling clouds and wide blue oceans filled the viewports. From high orbit, Earth looked unassuming, a serene marble that belied the histories inscribed upon its surface. They received clearance to land at a place the humans called Fort Benning, designated as a primary training ground for their military forces. The craft descended through layers of atmospheric turbulence, and Thera felt the gravity intensify in a way that made her breathing sacs tighten. Even with the adaptive technology that automatically recalibrated internal pressure, the planet felt heavy, as though it were challenging them upon arrival. When the ramp lowered, they stepped onto a flat tarmac under a brilliant sun. The air clung to them, thick, warmer than expected, and rich in oxygen compared to some other Council worlds. Standing in a neat line to welcome them were several uniformed humans, each figure upright in a disciplined posture. A tall man with dark skin and a serious gaze stepped forward. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "I'm General Marcus Jackson, United Earth Defense Force. It's an honor to host you." Thera inclined her head, her tendrils quivering in the Earth's unfamiliar gravity. "I am Assessor Thera Vexer, assigned by the Galactic Council to evaluate your readiness for membership. These are my colleagues, Tazlum, Fix, and Dronax." Jackson offered a polite nod to each. "We've prepared accommodations and several demonstrations. If you'll follow me, please." They were guided past structures of concrete and steel, each with a practical design that lacked the more ornate architecture Thera had seen on older worlds. Soldiers moved about with quiet efficiency, casting curious glances at their extraterrestrial visitors. As they reached a cluster of buildings, Thera noted that no one seemed particularly awestruck. She had visited emerging species that regarded alien visitors as near deities, but these humans met her gaze with open curiosity or the occasional polite nod, not subservient wonder. Inside a large briefing room, a holographic projector displayed old black and white footage, lines of trenches scarring a muddy field, men in rudimentary uniforms storming across open ground while artillery shells exploded. The images were grainy, accompanied by faint echoes of gunfire and shouted commands in a language she didn't understand. Jackson deactivated the hologram. "We know the Council is curious about our military history," he said, turning to face Thera. "So we'll start by demonstrating one of our earlier large-scale conflicts." "Earlier indeed," Dronax said. His features had softened with the artificial lighting, but Thera caught the note of condescension in his voice. "That looked extremely primitive." Jackson's reply was diplomatic. "Our technology has changed, but certain lessons remain, regardless of how advanced our weapons become." Not an hour later, the Council team found themselves transported to a sprawling field that had been deliberately pockmarked with craters, half-dug trenches, and a labyrinth of barbed wire. The air smelled of churned earth. Rows of men and women in replica uniforms took positions behind what looked like muddy embankments. A distant whistle shrieked, and the demonstration began. Artillery simulators erupted with thunderous booms, sending dirt and dust into the sky. Rounds of gunfire chattered. Then wave after wave of soldiers climbed out of the trenches, charging forward under a barrage of noise. Thera flinched at the violence of it all, even knowing these were blanks or carefully orchestrated explosive charges. The smoke that clung to the battlefield, the frantic determination on the faces of the participants, the repetitive push through mud. It was painfully clear that humans had once endured these conditions in genuine, brutal combat. Fix, standing beside her, wrapped two arms around her scanning device in an anxious posture. "It's barbaric," she whispered. "So much destruction for what?" Jackson approached quietly. "In the war this simulates, millions of casualties occurred. We learned crucial lessons about the cost of conflict." Dronax let out a low breath. "It's hardly something to take pride in." "No," Jackson agreed, "but it shaped who we became. That's why we still study it." After the display ended, the participants withdrew, and Thera noted the sweat and exhaustion on their faces. Even in a stage scenario, Earth's gravity, heat, and the pounding adrenaline of simulated battle were draining. She turned to Jackson. I still fail to see how reenacting this horror benefits your people now. His expression hardened slightly. We believe in remembering. Forgetting the agony of war would make us complacent. Our membership request is sincere, but it is built on an understanding of who we are, born of conflict, yes, but also of perseverance. They left the battlefield behind, returning to a transport that would ferry them to another site. Taz Lum hesitated before climbing aboard. General Jackson, he said in a subdued tone, your history is extraordinary in its violence. Is that not a liability when seeking a peaceful alliance with the Council? Jackson's mouth curved into a thin smile. Perhaps, but that's for you to decide, isn't it? The following day brought them to a cityscape constructed within an immense training complex. Towering buildings loomed over narrow streets. Battered vehicles lay overturned, and holographic civilians milled about in chaos. The simulation was that of an urban battlefield, according to Jackson. He explained how smaller, lightly armed groups could face overwhelming forces by blending into the environment, using guerrilla tactics, traps, and psychological warfare. As Viera and her team observed from a high vantage point, a small squad of human soldiers in civilian clothes orchestrated a series of ambushes against a much larger unit clad in heavy armor. Taz Lum's pulsating glow shifted toward an anxious green as he absorbed the scene. They're using the environment as a weapon, he remarked. Attacking from above, below, around corners, then disappearing. Jackson nodded. We call it asymmetric warfare. When an opponent has more troops, better gear, you adapt. The point is not to glorify brutality. It's to survive, to outthink a stronger enemy. A flash of an explosion somewhere below made Viera tighten her tendrils around the railing. This was but a simulation, yet the raw tension felt disturbingly real. She wondered if the humans, so adept at turning every disadvantage into an opportunity, might pose an existential threat to the Council if pushed. That evening, they stopped by another training field. This one cut through dense woodland. Soldiers wearing camouflage that matched the foliage seemed to melt into the wilderness, nearly invisible until they revealed themselves. Jackson walked them through the canopy, explaining how humans had learned to survive in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to desert wastelands, from high mountains to sweltering jungles. Fix took a few samples, hair, sweat, under the cover of these trees, studying the unique properties of human physiology. She noticed the elevated endorphins and cortisol levels in a soldier who had just finished a strenuous exercise but still remained battle-ready. Another had a minor cut, and she was astonished at how quickly the wound began to clot. They truly have lived with conflict for so long, Fix said softly, that even their bodies seem optimized for short bursts of intense violence. Adrenaline surges, robust clotting, rapid healing, like a species forged on a harsh crucible of perpetual struggle. Dronak stood by, arms crossed. Impressive, but also unsettling. The final demonstration of that day happened at a large indoor facility where hundreds of humans practiced hand-to-hand combat. Each clash of fists and block of arms was orchestrated, disciplined, but lethal in its intent. Men and women from different martial traditions circled and sparred, occasionally demonstrating throws or joint locks that slammed an opponent to the mat. At first glance, Viera considered it archaic, who needed unarmed fighting in an age of plasma rifles and planetary shields. Jackson, anticipating the question, explained that any technology could fail. Drones, weapons, communication satellites, all of them were tools that might break or be sabotaged. The fundamental skill of physical combat was, in humanity's eyes, an unbroken thread to their past. When the demonstrations wound down, Viera and her team met privately in the small suite the humans had provided for them. The atmospheric controls helped lighten Earth's gravity, granting the Xeno delegations some relief. Taz Lum's glow flickered from green to blue as he said aside his notes. I found references to more than 15,000 wars before they reached spaceflight. That is staggering. Dronax rumbled. It's almost incomprehensible. On my homeworld, we had the Great Unification War. Centuries ago, and that alone left scars we still remember. But these humans fought war after war, generation after generation, for millennia. Fix exhaled, her black eyes reflecting concern, and each conflict seemingly pushed them to adapt, to evolve physically, culturally, technologically. I have to wonder, if we provoke them, will they turn this unstoppable determination against us? Thera remained silent, leaning against a metal wall, letting the low hum of the climate systems fill the pause. There is a policy in the Council's highest echelons, she finally said, to contain or eliminate species that appear too aggressive, especially if they show exponential growth in warfare capabilities. Perhaps the humans sense that. Taslum's glow brightened. We must be cautious. If they suspect the Council might strike first, they could interpret everything we do here as a threat. That might explain why they are showing us so many aspects of their warfare. It's like a message: we are not easy prey. The next morning, the tension grew more tangible. Jackson arrived at their quarters, escorted by two other high-ranking officers. He informed them of an additional demonstration, one not originally on the itinerary. It would require them to travel to orbit. The Council's vessel was adequate for planet-to-space flight, but the humans insisted on using their own craft to ferry the delegation. The trip through Earth's atmosphere was jarring, with the small transport rattling under the stress. Soon, though, Thera found herself stepping into a massive orbital station. Through wide windows, she glimpsed Earth's curve receding below them. In neat, orderly rows floated hundreds of warships, ranging from agile corvettes to hulking dreadnoughts. They were not sleek or elegant by the standards Thera was used to seeing in the oldest Council fleets. Instead, they looked brutally utilitarian, every plate of armor angled for function over style. Admiral Zura Okoro, Earth Defense Fleet, introduced a tall woman wearing a dark uniform adorned with insignia. She offered a polite, formal greeting, then led the group down a corridor that opened into a strategic observation chamber. Transparent walls allowed for an almost dizzying view of the warships beyond. Okoro summoned a large hologram in the center of the chamber. At first, it displayed the silhouettes of a fleet Thera didn't recognize, spine vessels with advanced propulsion systems. Then a new set of readings scrolled across the display, describing a fierce space engagement. "This is a recreation," Okoro said calmly, "of an encounter 2 years ago with a hostile species called the Kriax. They found our planet and believed us to be untested, easy to subjugate." As the hologram played out, it showed the human fleet in a classic defensive formation before abruptly splintering into chaotic maneuvers. Smaller ships dove in and out of the Kriax ranks, sometimes colliding with them intentionally. Other human vessels feigned catastrophic damage only to reveal hidden weaponry at close range, crippling the Kriax command ships from the inside out. The results were devastating. The Kriax, though more advanced in standard measures, were blindsided by the unpredictability and ferocity of the human tactics. They were systematically dismantled. "We do not flaunt this victory," Okoro explained, her voice firm. "But we are not ashamed either. We call these methods fighting dirty. When confronted with superior technology, we turn to misdirection, sacrifice plays, and decentralized command. We adapted centuries-old guerrilla techniques to space combat." Thera felt a weight settle in her chest. War was never pleasant, but to see it orchestrated on this scale with such cunning unsettled her. "The Council has protocols against many of these tactics," she managed. "They are considered outside the bounds of civilized warfare." Okoro arched an eyebrow. Civilized warfare is a contradiction. War is inherently brutal, chaotic. We've learned to accept that reality. If we cling to illusions of a gentle war, we lose the advantage of adaptation. Taslum hovered closer, scanning the data. "According to these logs, there were no survivors on the Kriak side. You completely eradicated them." "No survivors from their fleet," Okoro corrected. "A few ground troops on outlying asteroids remained, but they were soon evacuated after a ceasefire was negotiated. The Kriaks have not returned. Dronax glared at the data streaming past. And the Council knew nothing of this? Okoro's lips tightened. So it seems. But we uncovered records showing the Council was monitoring the Kriaks for some time. Perhaps they deemed them too strong to confront. Or perhaps the Council simply did not care until we emerged victorious. The hologram changed to show images of alien species they are recognized. Some had existing trade agreements with the Council, others were neutral. Okoro swept a hand, and the images flickered to a series of harrowing invasions. We have survived 22 hostile encounters since achieving interstellar travel, the Admiral explained. Different species, different motives, but each believed Earth would be an easy conquest. Every time, they discovered otherwise. Fix stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. Why do you show us this? If you're truly trying to join the Council, isn't this presentation somewhat antagonistic? We want you to understand, Okoro said. We do not seek war with the Council. In fact, we greatly desire peaceful cooperation. But we also know about the Council's unspoken policy of preemptively eliminating species deemed too dangerous. We suspect some among you may advocate that approach with us. So let us make our position plain. If the Council chooses to attack, we will not vanish quietly. Silence hung in the observation chamber, broken only by the distant hum of station machinery. Thera studied Okoro's unwavering gaze. There was no overt hostility, but there was absolute resolve. By the time they returned to the docking bay, Thera's thoughts churned in a whirlwind of possibilities. She was conscious of her companions' troubled faces. Teslum seemed grim. Dronax looked both impressed and uneasy. Fix wore a worried frown that deepened with each revelation. General Jackson was waiting, arms clasped behind his back, an unreadable glint in his eyes. We appreciate you taking the time to see all we have to offer, he said. I know it has been intense. Thera cleared her throat. General, Admiral, this is more than we expected. The Council may not react favorably to some of these tactics. It goes against certain codes established among member species. Jackson's lips curved into that same predator smile Thera had noticed upon their first meeting. We respect the Council's codes, but we cannot apologize for doing what was necessary to protect ourselves. They parted ways with formal bows, the humans offering polite farewells and repeated statements of their sincere desire for friendship. Yet the tension remained, humming like a tight wire that could snap if tested. Their final evening on Earth was quiet. The humans had provided comfortable quarters with adjustable atmosphere controls. None of Thera's team seemed eager for conversation, so she spent much of the time alone, typing notes and analyzing data. She recounted every demonstration: the savage trench warfare simulation, the cunning ambushes in urban mazes, the adaptation to forest environments, the lethal proficiency in hand-to-hand combat, and, most chillingly, the spacefaring tactics that had obliterated the Kriaks fleet. She questioned her own biases, as well as the Council's. Had the Council grown complacent in an artificially maintained peace? Humanity's approach, forged by centuries of conflict, was indeed unsettling. Yet it was also undeniably effective. There was no guarantee that the rest of the galaxy was as civilized as the Council pretended to be. Morning came with a subdued sense of resolution. The humans escorted Thera and her group back to their own diplomatic vessel at a designated spaceport. Jackson accompanied them up the ramp, then paused just inside the airlock. He spoke quietly. Assessor Vexer, I trust you will report everything you've seen with honesty. Thera returned his gaze. Of course, honesty is my duty. A flicker of that predatory edge surfaced in his eyes. If the Council approves our membership, we will do our best to abide by your rules of engagement. But if they decide to act against us, he let the sentence dangle. She nodded stiffly, uncertain how else to reply. During the ascent, Earth's curve fell away, revealing the star-speckled void. Taz Lum hovered near a window, pulsing gently with anxiety. Dronax sat with arms folded, eyes closed, his expression torn between professional respect for humanity's prowess and apprehension about their unpredictability. Fix murmured about the biological samples she collected, struggling to interpret them in the broader political context. Finally, Vera summoned them to a small meeting area. We should come to a consensus on how to present our findings. Dronax opened his eyes. My recommendation is clear. The Council should deny membership. Humans are too violent, too reliant on unsanctioned tactics. Taz Lum's glow went from green to a faint red. But that invites the possibility of conflict. They've effectively shown they would not be subdued easily. Perhaps it's more prudent to bring them into the Council, channel that strength into a shared defense. Fix rubbed her temples. A compromise, maybe? Provisional membership with close monitoring? We can't just slam the door on them. That might trigger exactly what we fear. Vera listened to all sides, recalling each demonstration she had witnessed. She remembered the unwavering eyes of the human soldiers trudging through muddy trenches, their readiness to endure. Horrific circumstances in archaic warfare. She remembered the way they used cunning ambushes in city blocks. She remembered the savage brilliance of their space tactics. Above all, she remembered Admiral Okoro's calm statement. Humanity had survived 22 hostile encounters since venturing into space. She wondered if the Council, protected by its illusions, even realized how dangerous the galaxy could be. The humans knew because they had been forced to confront it again and again. When they at last docked with the Council station, Vera stepped out of the vessel into the familiar corridors she had paced only days before. Now, though, she felt heavier, not because of Earth's gravity, but because of the knowledge she carried. In a secured chamber, she began to compose her official report. It had to be thorough. The Council demanded details on technology, culture, moral frameworks, and any potential threat to interstellar stability. She described the humans' historical conflicts in unflinching terms, acknowledged their skillful and sometimes ruthless tactics, but also highlighted their proven capacity for cooperation, their strong sense of loyalty, and their desire to avoid oppression. Hours turned into a blur of careful wording. She knew that some on the Council would interpret any sign of aggression as cause to label humans a threat. Others might see the strategic value in admitting them. The entire membership hung on the delicate line between fear and respect. When she was done, Vera sat back in her chair and reread the final paragraphs. It was not a condemnation, nor was it a glowing endorsement. It was an honest reflection. Humanity, forged in the crucible of countless internal wars, has demonstrated adaptability beyond typical Council metrics. Their capacity for coordinated defense, psychological warfare, and combat improvisation is unparalleled among newly discovered species. While this may alarm the Council's more peace-oriented members, it is my assessment that such capabilities could prove invaluable in a galaxy that, despite our best efforts, remains fraught with conflicts and aggressors. She transmitted the report, her breathing sacs fluttering in an uneven rhythm. The Council's ultimate decision was out of her hands. Regardless of how the vote would fall, she sensed one truth resonating. The humans could not be easily conquered or erased. They had shown her that in a dozen different ways, none of which left room for doubt. A part of her mused that the Council, in its arrogance, often overlooked the potential of less advanced species. But Earth was a paradox, a planet that was in some ways behind older civilizations, yet had distilled lessons of warfare so thoroughly that it had become a master of survival. Days later, she was summoned to a private session with the Council's higher-tier officials. The debate was fierce. Some cited the code of civilized warfare and the humans' disregard for it. Others pointed to the precarious position of the Council, recalling how recent member civilizations had fallen to unanticipated invasions. Perhaps humanity was precisely the ally they needed. No official announcement was made that day, and Vera returned to her station quarters exhausted. She gazed through a viewport at the star-laden darkness. Somewhere out there, Earth's defenders remained alert, uncertain whether the Council would embrace or reject them. She remembered the final look in General Jackson's eyes, a mixture of courtesy and warning. She remembered the unwavering conviction in Admiral Okoro's voice as she spoke of the Kriaks. Neither seemed eager for conflict, but both were absolutely prepared to fight if necessary. As the artificial night cycle dimmed the lights in her quarters, Thera allowed herself a quiet reflection. They mocked humanity's history, scoffing at the incessant wars, the so-called primitive brutality, the repeated cycles of conflict. But now, having witnessed Earth's warriors firsthand, few within the Council would ever mock again. In the hush of that starlit station corridor, she felt a shift in the cosmic equilibrium, like the hush before a storm, or perhaps before a grand awakening. If the Council admitted them, humanity would forever alter the balance of power. If the Council refused, or threatened them, humanity's response would be equally transformative, if far more destructive. Either way, the lessons gleaned from Earth's bloody chapters were not just about bombs and bullets, but about willpower, ingenuity, and above all, the relentless desire to survive. Sometime later, as she was about to close her eyes for a cycle's rest, a message chimed on the console. She opened it, scanning the lines from a Council official. No final verdict had been reached. The debates would continue. In essence, the humans were left in limbo. Thera switched off the display. She thought of Taz Lum's quiet awe, Fix's mounting concerns about a species shaped by perpetual struggle, and Dronax's grudging admiration. She thought of Jackson's assured composure and the unstoppable, swirling potential of Earth's defenders, ready to adapt to any adversity. Even if the membership never came, humanity had shown the Council something it rarely encountered, a civilization that embraced every scrap of history, every war, every tragedy, every painful evolution, and synthesized it into a core principle. They would never again be at the mercy of a stronger force. They would plan, adapt, strike, endure. She took one last look out the viewport, where countless stars shimmered. One of them was Sol, faint and unremarkable at a glance, but symbolic of a planet that had defied the odds. The phrase that started it all returned to her mind. They mocked humanity's history, until Earth's warriors showed them what it meant. Indeed, they had. In the quiet, as she drifted into a restless sleep, Thera understood that the greatest impact of her report was not whether it led to acceptance or denial. It was that the Council, for the first time in many cycles, felt the stirrings of something it had grown dangerously comfortable ignoring. The existence of a species that could not be neatly categorized or subdued. Respect, perhaps tinged with fear, would be humanity's lasting legacy in the cosmic community. When she dreamed of muddy trenches and silent forests, of battered warships drifting near a planet that refused to yield. She dreamed of 1,000 fires burning across 1,000 fields on Earth, each flame a testament to the unbreakable resilience of those who had ignited them. And amidst the haze of artillery smoke and dust, she saw the unwavering eyes of human soldiers standing firm, no matter the enemy or the cost. In that dream, Thera felt the Council's future pivot. Perhaps humanity would become a powerful member, bringing new energy and defensive strategies to safeguard other worlds. Or perhaps the Council's warier members would overreach, trying to preemptively quell a threat that was no threat at all, only to discover that Earth's warriors would never bow to superior might alone. She awoke, her mind spinning with the possibilities. But beneath the swirl of uncertainty lay a single clear truth. Humanity had taught her, and would teach the entire Council, the true meaning of perseverance born of conflict. If the galaxy had mocked them once, it would not do so again.